For some people, their time at school is some of their most fond memories, but for others, it's a time that they would rather forget. Overall though, school does teach us various lessons in life, and these lessons could be within certain subjects such as English or maths, but there are some lessons that school seems to fail to teach us, and that's what I want to cover in this video. So the main goal of this video is to share some of the main lessons that I think gives you a really strong foundation and direction in life, but schools overall fail to teach us. So jumping in at number one is the idea that mistakes are in fact the answers. So why I think this is particularly important when it comes to education is that throughout our schooling years, usually we are rewarded for getting things correct and we are disincentivized or punished for getting things wrong. So upon first glance, this might seem like a very natural and organic way to go, but when you delve in a little deeper, you realize that what it ends up doing is it pushes people away from trying new things and embracing the idea of making mistakes and failure as a whole. School tends to teach us a lot about success and the criteria by which we become successful, but it doesn't really teach us much about failure. Whether you're a notable academic, a successful business person, or a distinguished athlete, one of the main things that they all share in common in terms of being able to get to the top of that respective field is that it requires a lot of trial and error and a lot of failure in order to get there. If you take any person who you admire and look at the particular area of their life that you admire about them, then there's a very good chance, and I can confidently say, one of the reasons that they've excelled is because they've tried that particular skill more than most people, and along the way they've failed more than most people. I'm not saying that natural talent doesn't exist at all, but if you take a simple example like a golfer, one of the main reasons that made them perform so well over a long period of time is that they put in the reps and they put in the hours. So really it comes down to embracing the idea of growth comes from struggle, and this will help you avoid analysis paralysis. So moving on to number two, and this one is partly related, but it's take more risks. One of the things that education seems to teach us is the idea of conformity and the path of least resistance, but this path might not always be the best or most optimal route to take. In fact, I would go as far as saying that the majority of the most successful people on this planet have got to where they did because they didn't follow the crowd and they went their own way. I think it's worth pointing out that a lack of conformity doesn't mean more hostility or a lack of kindness or compassion. It just means sometimes following your own heart is a better way to go than following the crowd. Just because the majority of people does something doesn't necessarily mean that they are correct, but even more than that, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's correct for you and that their interests are aligned with your own. Number three is systems are more important than results. It seems that in most areas of life we're measured based on the outcome or the result, but sometimes a bad result doesn't necessarily mean you made a bad decision. The term used to describe this phenomenon is results-based analysis. This concept applies in many different ways, and one such example would be when choosing a school for your kids. You happen to choose the school with the highest ratings or the one that was most recommended, and yet it ended up leading to a bad experience for your child. It would be easy here to blame yourself or the situation as a whole, but actually when you look at things more broadly, based on what you knew at the time, it was actually the decision that made the most sense. I think one of the areas that I see results-based analysis being used most frequently is within the domain of sport. You could have two football teams that play very different styles, and one team for all intents and purposes dominates the game. So they have more shots, more possession, everything that they did was efficient and impressive, yet unfortunately in the last minute the opposing team got lucky and got a penalty and scored the winning goal. Obviously within the field of sport results matter, but it's easy to get caught up in the specifics and assume that you did something wrong or the other team played better than you, when in fact sometimes things align for one team and everything goes wrong for the other. But this is where systems come into play, because whether you are involved in sport, business or any other area of your life, if you have the right system, the results will come and go, but generally point you in the right direction, and the results come as a result of having good or effective systems. This kind of leads into the fields of probability and statistics, because if you end up doing the right things over and over again, while you might not have a 100% win rate, you will have more than 50% win rate, and the more effective your system or strategy, the better that win rate will be. The next point revolves around learning, and that is conceptual understanding is better than factual knowledge. In many schooling systems, when it comes to assessing or testing the students, what often happens is that they prioritize multiple choice questions where you have to choose between a limited number of answers. In my opinion, this is not only a very superficial way of testing students, but it's also a very superficial way of making the students actually learn in the first place. What matters a lot more than the individual fact is the context and the wider concept overall. For example, if you were doing a maths test, it doesn't make sense to be tested on whether you can remember the number pi up to, say, 10 or 20 decimal places. Instead, what really matters is, are you able to combine your knowledge in order to be able to calculate a particular question based on a particular method? Same is true in, say, physics or science. What matters is that you're able to understand the particular concept, such as light or energy, rather than remembering a particular formula or a particular constant within that field. The main reason why I think this is a problem is that when it comes to exams, what students often do is learn how to take the test and what things to memorize. But this doesn't typically have very far-reaching consequences or benefits, because usually once the test is over, you end up forgetting that very thing that you tried to learn in the first place. Ultimately, facts are easily forgotten, but conceptual understanding stays with you for a long period of time. This, alongside first principles thinking, will stay with you far into the future and will provide a lot more impact and benefits to you in the future. The next one is the most powerful weapons that you can wield are social skills and the ability to articulate yourself both textually and verbally. Often we're taught in school that in order to become successful, we need to have a strong knowledge within a very niche field, such as calculus within mathematics. But in reality, the skill of being able to articulate yourself, express yourself, and communicate with others will be much more impactful and will bring a lot more success than having decent knowledge in a small area. The next one is the skill of personal finance. It is true that there are certain subjects within school that can give you some foundation in this, such as business and accounting, but I guess there are two main problems. Firstly, only a small subset of students actually take these subjects, so it leaves everyone else in the dark. But secondly, the emphasis is geared really towards business and how to apply these skills in the working world. Having a solid understanding of personal finance can be the difference between remaining poor and struggling throughout your life versus being either wealthy or comfortable in this particular area. In the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, he constantly explains why the poor remain poor and the rich get richer. Some people like to think that it's because we live in an unfair world and that all rich people are inherently evil or shady, and that's why they become wealthy and stay wealthy in the first place. But the more I read up and learn about finance, the more I realise that this isn't true, and there are very smart people who come from deprived environments that stay poor or stay deprived purely because they don't know how to channel their intelligence. Just knowing how money works can go a long way, and this can give you that sense of direction in order to be able to improve your own circumstances and even become quite successful in the future. And the last one is arguably one of the most important, and that is knowing how to work with and maximize your own emotional health. The truth is, we've all been dealt different cards and we all have to deal with different circumstances, but knowing how to make the most of what you have and being able to deal with the particularly challenging times is the difference between driving a car blindfolded and driving a car with clear and perfect vision. I actually think it helps to think of our bodies and mind as a vehicle, and we are its operators. The problem is none of us have been born with an operating or instruction manual, so we're kind of shooting in the dark. But the thing that most people don't realise is that there are resources out there that can help you become better acquainted with your own body and mind, and then you're able to make the most of what you have, and it becomes a lot easier and more effective to do what you actually want to do. I recently made a video on the book The Chimp Paradox, and I think this is a really good book for people who are new to the idea of psychology, self-understanding, and you want to be able to grasp better your emotions and your mind as a whole. There's no such thing as an easy life, but it can be made so much easier and so much simpler when you have a little bit of structure and a little bit of guidance to help you along the way. So I hope you found this video useful or interesting. Let me know your thoughts below, subscribe if you're interested, and I'll see you in the next one.